Good. Next is something special. So panel discussion. I'm really excited about talking to the team, the Schibsted team here. And, Schibsted is we're going to ask them later what Schibsted is, but, I did a little bit of my Googling homework and found that, of course, Schibsted is a media company. And it's a media company that has been around for a little bit since 1839. So it's quite a media company. I'm not sure if they started as a media company back then, but I'm sure the team will tell us a little bit. But I would love to introduce the team right now, and let's kick it off with Paul Beskow. So Paul is a technical architect at Schibsted. And Paul, if you could you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself and give the people here a brief background about your work and your role.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us today. It's really nice to be a part of this community. So it's fun to be able to contribute back. Yeah, so I'm Paul Beskow, technical architect in Schibsted. My background, I've been working with distributed systems and media for a long time. I have a PhD in networks and distributed systems, where we were focused on sort of execution engines, something a la Spark engines, just a little bit sort of earlier on. So playing with those concepts. Then I worked with video conferencing in Cisco previously, and found myself in Schibsted eventually, which is a great company to work at. We do a lot of interesting things, which we'll tell you more about. So yeah, in Schibsted, I work in something called Data Foundations, and we are one of the sort of central teams. So Schibsted is sort of composed of a lot of different brands. We are something like 40 different companies in total. And we deliver these central services. So we do like data collection, behavioral data, and these kind of things. And then we build up sort of the products based on that for personalization, etc. Yeah, and I work in Data Foundations sort of across 7 teams. So
fantastic. And so for how long have you been with Schibsted?
So in total, it's 6 years, I think. And then I was out for about, so I took a break, joining another company. So I'm what we call a boomerang. So I'm back for my second stint, actually. So.
Well, it just speaks for Schibsted that people come back. That's great news. Fantastic. So next we have, I hope I say it correctly, Mücahit. Mücahit is a senior data engineer. And Mücahit, if you could, please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and give us a big background about your role at Schibsted.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, my name is Mücahit. It was actually a great pronunciation. I work in Schibsted almost for 3 years. And I worked mostly as a data engineer, but recently I switched to mostly platform data / platform engineer. In Schibsted, I worked mostly on some internal segmentation tool that consists of ML and also batch data processing, batch and streaming. And then I switched to platform team, which is actually maintaining AWS accounts, permissions, CI/CD, monitoring, logging, Kubernetes. Also, recently we started working on unifying or having a standardized batch pipeline processing. And we actually wanted to go with Flyte, so I'm also helping on this migration.
Fantastic. That sounds like more than a classical and typical data engineering hat that you're wearing here with all the stuff you have done, right?
Yeah, that was a bit earlier. Now it's not much of data engineering, but mostly platform or operation.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Thank you. Next, we have Björn Schiffler. Björn is a staff data scientist. And Björn, if you could, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself and give the people here a brief background about your role and responsibility at Schibsted.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. Yeah, so as you mentioned, my name is Björn. I'm staff data scientist at Schibsted. Have been with Schibsted for about 1.5 years now. And I'm both kind of working in a team and then also across the wider organization a little bit. So In the team that this team is called the contextual team. So what we are doing is focusing on mostly on contextual advertisement. So placing basically ads next to articles that are semantically similar in some way. With the idea that then we don't need to track user behavior. We don't need to place cookies on people's PCs. We can basically just use the content that we have to place relevant ads next to it. So that is part of my role, and then another part is initiatives across the Schibsted organization. That is, for example, AI upscaling courses that we are giving, to help people basically to develop in AI and machine learning.
Fantastic. So just for clarification, is the placement, is that an NLP-based task, or is that more a you have metadata and use more the classical relating meta, or both? I mean, it could be many ways. So
yeah, I think there is a lot of NLP. I mean, it's partly just the old pipelines are basically keyword based, but then we are also experimenting with semantic search approaches. So and then we'll need more kind of newer NLP techniques to solve that.
And maybe some Levenstein distances and so on. So good, love it. Thanks, Björn. Next we have Yini. Yini is a ML engineer, and I hope I don't butcher the name. So the interesting piece information here is we have a full ML workflow team here. That we talked about data engineering and platform, data science, and now ML engineering. So please, Yini, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, your role at Schibsted.
Hey, thank you for having me. My name is Yini, and I'm machine learning from the same team as Björn. And regarding the machine learning we do in the team, I think, so we start from for example, the data analyst, and then the data modeling, and then some software engineering to put the ML solution into production. This is basically the journey that we did in terms of machine learning. And yes, that's it.
Fantastic. Sounds easy. That's it. But we know it's like there's a lot that comes with it to make that happen. So we'll speak a little bit later. Thank you so much. Last but not least, we have Oleg, and I don't try the last name again. Oleg. Ievtushok, I think, is what I remember. But Oleg is the engineering manager. And Oleg, if you could unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about your background.
Yes, thank you, Martin. My name is Oleg. I am engineering manager in one of the teams that is in the same department as everyone who spoke before me. We are mostly focused on building user profiles for personalization, advertising, user insights, and we're used by a bunch of teams within Schibsted. Yeah, my background is basically software engineering, and then a little bit of ML, and then data engineering. And now I worked for 3 years in Schibsted. 2 of them was a data engineer, and switched hat a little bit for a year, and now I'm engineering manager.
Wow, fantastic. So user profile sounds very much like CDPs or customer data platform. Is that what we should see there? Is that related to it, or so?
Yeah, pretty much. You can put it this way.
Fantastic. No, CDP is fantastic. And there's also actually, quite frankly, a whole lot of data science in there, understanding, how you hold profiles together. If you have some, footprints from here and from there, and then actually making sure you have a very meaningful, profile. And then obviously what you want to do there, I assume you do a lot of attribution, maybe probabilistic attribution as well.
Yeah, we have also, as Björn talked before, we were also thinking about maybe the combination of somewhat contextual data and what we have, and basically providing some mixture of what we have and they have. Yeah, advertising platform of future, or personalization in a better way. So yeah, we'll see where it gets us.
Fantastic, great. So let me start with a very, simple opener question about Schibsted. Obviously, the company, and so this is, I think, whoever wants to answer it. The company has been founded 1839, so now it's a big international media group. So tell the audience a little bit about Schibsted. Who wants to do this? Paul, Oleg, who wants to take the lead here?
I can do it.
Oleg,
So
Go for it.
Schibsted is it's a family of brands. We're around 50, and the majority of those are newspapers and the marketplaces. I think these are two main so-called verticals, if you want to put it this way. And there is a bunch of ventures and new companies that are more focused on helping customers making better choices. And overall, the goal of Schibsted is to make lives of humans better by helping them to make better decisions. So newspapers obviously do a lot of news personalization and trying to kind of serve better content. Marketplaces have their needs with showing relevant information to the users, so they basically can find what they're looking for, and the rest is a bit of a mix. So it's hard to put it in one box. So there is I cannot name a very specific niche, unfortunately. But yeah, that's us, and we're spread across 4 Nordic countries, which is Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland.
Got it. I mean, it sounds like much of that business was classically, classifieds and so on. That has disappeared to some extent, and now it has shifted into, obviously what you're saying right now. So it's transformation is happening there, still happening there. I think it's very, very interesting to see that use case. So what I would love to ask the team is another very, sounds like a simple question, but I guess it's very complex. How do you as a team define data and ML workflow? So there's a lot of implication here, but maybe I can ask the data engineer, Mücahit, because you're sitting at the core of the data here. So what is a data workflow to you?
Yeah, so we should start from the source of the data, where it's coming from, and where is it going to be used. So we have other teams that are actually responsible from collecting the data and bringing it into the data platform. And from there, it all depends on the cadence of the product that we want to use it for. Do we want to use the data in every hour, or do we want just daily updates or hourly updates, or do we want to actually be very responsive on updates like every 10 seconds, for example? So it all depends on the raw data and product, and we have different variety of products. So it's kind of depends on the use case, I can say.
Okay, great. And now, as obviously we have heard various use cases from Oleg about profiling, building profiles, to Björn's placement of contextually relevant ads next to people. I think there's the multiple ML use cases down the road. So how does the data workflow serve all of those use cases? What's Schibsted's recipe for that? Maybe we should ask the data scientist or ML engineer here, Björn. How do you connect those things?
I mean that's basically at the heart of what we're doing, right? We need the data flowing in some way, being pre-processed, being transformed in a certain direction, so that we are able in the end then to build a model and to make inferences from that model. And yeah, we have a variety of different models that are in production for us right now, that ranges from classical word embedding models to topic models to more modern transfer learning models. So there is a variety of different pipelines that need to function for us, so that we can then use it for the eventual purpose of placing these contextual advertisements.
Got it. So I think, Paul, what we have here is a whole lot of use cases, and I think for you as the architect here, so you have to listen to all of those use cases, I assume, and then I think you have to come up and figure out, what's the right architecture. So tell us a little bit about, how did you come up? What's your current solution? What is the tech stack that you have today, and what was the process, the journey to get to this tech stack?
Yeah, and Oleg, feel free to help me out here if I butcher something. But yeah, so in terms of sort of when we came to this point where we wanted to reevaluate, okay, how are we processing our data, and mainly from the batch perspective, we sat down and we sort of looked at what are our requirements, basically. So I think we came up with something like 26 dimensions or something. And it was kind of interesting to hear. I was looking and listening to the SIP recruiter talk, and it was, we could draw a lot of parallels from our journey and what sorry, I can't remember his name, but what he was talking about in that video as well. So basically, we have all these requirements, right? We have some that are organizational. So we want to be able to move more quickly with less people. We want to have clearer separation between platform data engineering, data science, and not because we don't want them to talk together, but because we want them to actually be able to focus on the skill sets that they love to work with, right? I can't remember, there was some article where it was, what was it? Data scientists spend something between 60 and 80% of their time working with everything else except actually data science. And I mean, if we can push that number down, I mean, we're pretty bad at that as well. I think that's also sort of one of the goals in terms of separation. Actually, maybe focus is a better way of putting it. So that's sort of on the organizational side. And then we also have all of these functional requirements, which is where you tick a box, right? So the organizational requirements can be a bit more sort of tricky to say, yeah, we manage this or not. I mean, I think we have a good feeling about Flyte that it will push a lot of these needs in the right direction. And then from the functional requirements, I think we had some, 26, was that what I said? Where we are looking at things like, okay, is it data or task oriented, right? Where there's sort of this trend in the market shifting towards more of the data side. Other ones are like, okay, is it, do we have multilingual, for instance? Does it support a lot of different languages, which is more or less important, maybe, depending. The modes of execution that we call it, where fast register is a huge thing, right? Being able to iterate quickly is a big thing, so that you don't get this time sink. Reproducibility, interpretability, recoverability, etc., etc. So comparing this with what we have today, then, so we have these 26 requirements. We went out into the data orchestration landscape, which is growing. It's pretty big, right? I think we looked at 10 different solutions. And we were kind of depressed for a long time because there was no sort of significant leap as far as we were concerned, right? So we were using Luigi today. If we go to something like Airflow, it feels more like a lateral move. So one of the things we want to be able to do is cover, for instance, both the engineering, data engineering perspective with Spark, etc., which is the more classical ETL type stuff. And then we also want to be able to run and orchestrate our machine learning and data science models. But there wasn't really anything that gave us a lot of benefits. So, I mean, doing this kind of migration, it requires a lot of time and resources. So you have to be able to defend that in some kind of way. But with Flyte, we were really optimistic once we sort of found it. What was it, 2020, 2021, I think you open sourced it. So it's relatively new. But since then, it's been really fun to sort of take a comparing these two solutions. Then, should we invest in Luigi or should we move on with something like Flyte, for instance? Now I've been talking for a long time here, so I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly, Martin. Yeah. So please.
Absolutely. So Oleg, I'm going to bring you in here real quick. And so obviously you have had Paul think about this and make architectural comparisons between Luigi and Flyte. What was your role in that context? Tell us a little bit and your thoughts about making a decision.
Yeah, so for me as a member of one of the teams, we have a history with Spark. So we have been running Spark since, or the old team in London was running Spark since 2015 in the old Mesos cluster. And around 2019, when I joined Schibsted, we decided to move to Kubernetes. And back then, we still decided to keep Luigi, but we had to patch it a little bit, create an internal library that would allow us to do the Spark submit to the Kubernetes. And it kind of worked. We were happy, there was nothing else. So for 2-3 years, we were happy with what we had, but UI was not perfect. There were some hiccups here and there. And then I think in 2020, we decided to try this new cool thing called deep learning, which was not so new anymore, but we thought that we can squeeze in a little bit more performance from one of our pipelines and try to get something more out of it. And that is where I realized that Luigi is probably not the best tool to approach this kind of tasks, because it turns out that you need to monitor the Luigi pods in Kubernetes, and you need to schedule them in the right place, etc., etc. And there's all these details that suddenly data scientists, it's not like they don't want to do it, but I think that it's another skill set. So you need to bring someone who knows it for a couple of days to solve a very specific problem, and then shift it back. And this unpredictability of what kind of problems are you facing sort of caused a lot of stress for the team. So my idea from there was to try to find something a little bit better that would make, you can call it a developer productivity, I don't know, developer experience for data scientists that will help them to iterate faster in a fashion that they're used to. And we thought about Databricks. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to pronounce the name of the competitor, but still the idea is that whether you go with notebooks and how do you switch to the existing code base, because that's also very kind of tricky thing to do. So my idea was always, I wanted to have a project that I can load into the Kubernetes cluster, submit a task, try it out, it doesn't work, revert, do something else, and kind of have this back and forth as a, I don't know, developer machine, right? That became a thing some time ago. And I think one of the Databricks blogs actually mentioned that the dev machine is becoming a thing and they use it quite a lot. So I have been thinking around something like that for data scientists to be able to experiment fast and deploy. Basically, you have a model that can be ready for testing or for evaluation, basically, and comparing to the existing model that is running in production. So that was that's how I see that Flyte can help us in this way.
And before we hand it over to the data science and ML engineering team, I would love to bring in Mücahit. So you mentioned earlier you had like obviously your platform background and the Kubernetes background. Obviously, I assume for you Kubernetes was one of the requirements for the new platform.
Yeah, so Kubernetes is something our central infra team actually pushing for, because it's highly maintained by them, and we have lots of things in place like central logging integration in Kubernetes, security patches, the upgrade of the clusters, monitoring tools, etc. So we have everything in place, and if we are actually using this standardized tool, we don't have to maintain multiple different platforms for actually doing the same thing. For example, some teams might be using EMR, some teams are using Luigi, and all the upgrades of for security patches and logging agents, monitoring agents, etc., are actually diverging into different directions, and people are specializing in with different things, and that actually also adds some friction between not friction, but it makes it hard for people to work within other teams. And now it's actually easier if we have a simple or single platform. People can actually interact with each other easily. So that's Kubernetes is something we actually want to have more. It's plus from the platform perspective, it was like that, but plus the developer productivity perspective, I think it's very good because you can easily create a Docker image and easily deploy it, and you have the actually production or some environment that's very close to production, and you can easily test and iterate on your cloud platform other than running it locally, testing locally, and then deploying to cloud. And the whole deployment takes some time, and then you notice a mistake, so you do repeats everything. That kind of kills the whole iteration process for developers. So from platform, we love that we have a single platform that we don't have to maintain 3 different platforms.
That's great. So typically the question is, I mean, you, I think Oleg and Paul, and I think you with your background, I think for you it's probably very easy to say we need this as an infrastructure, but then you go to data science and machine learning, and then potentially you send some people shivers down the spine when you say we need Kubernetes and we need to run your workflow in here. And so let's Yini, let's bring you in and see. Obviously, with those infrastructure requirements, how did you feel and how did you get involved in making that decision of using Flyte?
So basically, I'd like to start from the history from our team. Like, so in our team, we used to train or manage our machine learning model in a very manual and offline fashion. So we start from a Jupyter notebook, and then for exploration and the demo things. And after we decide to go with this machine learning model into production, then we do some, then we write it into some like production ready script. Then we normally manually train with that script and manually storing that model into some specific bucket. That's our journey for machine learning for a very long time, because we only have very limited number of machine learning model and we don't train it very regularly. So at the beginning, it's very manageable. But as the number of machine learning model in our team grows, it becomes very clumsy to do it manually. It's a lot of manual labor because we need to run the script and storing the model, and also sometimes we need to do this eyeballing to evaluate the model. So from this journey, we start to think about maybe we need to find some standard platform to put our pipeline in, so that we can manage them together and we can use it to automate our training, etc., and also provide us better platform for versioning and observability. So I think that's the kind of the reason that we decide to go with some machine learning operation friendly platform. Yes, that's basic my thinking on that. Yeah.
So I think what you just said is like, I feel like rings so true and sounds so, the experience they had before is so typical for so many organizations right now, that at some point they write, notebook scripts and Jupyter notebooks, and then this stuff gets put in production. I mean, for you, it's probably maybe even a one-dimensional step from Python, writing it and putting in production. Other teams write R, that gets translated in machine learning in Python, and then gets put in production. And then features are very different from what they used to be before. And so that's all very difficult stuff to do. And then obviously the more you have to monitor. So at some point, it's no longer peace of mind, and it's very difficult. So was it for you clear what you wanted to begin with solution-wise, or did you have to go through a discovery journey as well and figure out which one is the solution, the platform that could help you there?
Personally, I have tried out to manage the training pipeline with the AWS resource. I have tried it out during a 2-day lab day to set up let me think about I think it's the step function as the orchestrator and use the Lambda as the worker to run the training script, and use the event bridge as the scheduler to automate it. I have tried to do that. And I mean, AWS resource is very versatile and powerful, but it do need a lot of engineering experience on that, and you need to manually prevention the resource and do all the stuff yourself to set up this work stack. So that's a totally different experience compared to using Flyte.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I went through the same journey. I actually had my feature builders product as lambdas, so on the fly for batch processing, and I felt like, yeah, it's good, but then once you put your inference there and you do modeling as well, you have like all the restrictions that all of a sudden kick in, and and you don't get out of those experiences kind of like, how do you control your model drift? I mean, there's no answer for that. It's just like putting up an endpoint and then building the features for the endpoint, right? So you get a partial solution. Then you look for other partial point solutions, and you don't have a system that works together. Was that a similar experience for you?
Yeah, exactly. Just like you said, it's just where we can manage or orchestrate this training. But in terms of monitoring and the rest, there is no like off-the-shelf solution to make it compatible with. And also, I forgot to mention there is a limitation on Lambda function. So basically, you can only prevention maximum 10 gigabytes for the Lambda function. And also in our case, depends on like how many training data you are using. There is a high possibility to run out of memory during training. It's also a very like a limitation when you use this kind of materials in AWS.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and then Björn, I mean, obviously you're on the data science side, and you and your team come up with kind of like, what is the next best model that you can throw at something to solve something. So how did you work together now with Yini? Because I think now you cover kind of like, this the beginning part of the workflow and then the production side with Yini, and that's, so how did you actually work together, and how is that now using a platform like Flyte?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing discussion, within the team, how exactly we want to set up things. And I think now it's, partially it's new models that we want to build pipelines in Flyte, and it's old models where we need to port the older pipelines that exist into Flyte. And sometimes it's easier, sometimes that's a bit more difficult. And I think sometimes it's even easier to start from scratch and to once you know kind of this kind of DAG-like workflow, how it should look like in the end. I think then conceptually you can more easily come up with kind of the steps that should be implemented in the pipeline. And then, I mean, I really enjoy that, the idea that we are all converging towards kind of a common solution across the department enables us to, offload some of the knowledge, to maintain Kubernetes and other things like that, to the platform team and focus on kind of the data science aspects, and coming up with new models. And I think I can only echo what Yini said about this kind of traditional way of working, starting off with Jupyter notebooks, exploring the data, and then testing various models. And then you find something that is good and seems to work well. So what do you do then, right? How do you take kind of the next step, bring that into production and actually let it work for you? And I think that's something, I've seen this in consulting, in data science consulting before I joined Schibsted. And I'm seeing it now as well, when we have these AI upscaling courses where the participants in the end are making projects in the various areas of ML. It's you can make nice prototypes, but then what is the next step? And I think a framework like Flyte, that basically, where you then have some cookie cutter templates, that enables, I think, people to more easily take this stuff into production. Especially if it's data scientists that are not heavy on the engineering side.
Great. Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. So we're almost at the end of the sync, but I do have two more questions for the team. One is, hindsight is always 20/20. So if you look back, all the good and also not so good decisions, right? But there are other teams, they're just like experiencing what you just earlier described, right? And they're just doing it exactly that way. So looking back now, what is it that you would recommend a team similar to yours, where you were like 2 to 3 years ago? Maybe the one recommendation from each of you that you have for your counterpart, like from a data engineering point of view, from a data science point of view, from an architectural point of view, including things who should take the lead. So what were the learnings? And maybe you can share one. That would be fantastic to know. So I'm going to start with Paul. What's the one top learning that you would want to share?
Yeah, no, I have a lot I could share, but I think I want to go with actually community, because one of the things that really struck me is the Flyte community in itself. Don't underestimate the power of a good community, right? You're very welcoming. You created a support channel for us without asking. You just did it, and we have good chats going there, and so many people contributing to Flyte, etc. Yeah, you can have all your requirements and everything and different needs, but finding a project that gets a lot of love and has an open and warm and welcoming community, I think can push things over the edge, right? So maybe one as a softer quality, but definitely something I would keep in mind.
Fantastic. Yini, what's the hindsight learning that you would want to share with other machine learning engineers?
That's a good question. Let me think about it. I don't know.
Let me ask you that question. So is it? I think one that often comes to mind. Should you engage with your infrastructure team sooner or later, or should you go down the road and figure out things on your own? I always think, like, on the machine learning side, data science side, the question is, when do you engage with your platform infrastructure team? Did you do it early enough, or was that always a thing that happened there, or was this just like coming in late?
In terms of engaging with like platform thing, I think I have great experience on that, because I was working on really migrate a training pipeline into Flyte during last month. So I think in our scenario, the platform team, which is Mücahit, is mainly working on managing all the back end of the Flyte, and he managed all the the environment and the privation and the resourcing thing for us. So in my experience, I really kind of collaborate with him a lot of the time, because I'm the first user of the platform that he set up for our department, and there is a lot of things that we need to work together to make it clear, and the problems only appear when you really try it out, right? Yeah, so in my case, I engage a lot with the platform within the organization. And in terms of the engagement with Flyte community, I think for example, I use the doc daily, and when I stuck at some problem, I always go to the Slack channel and try to search the similar problem. And I found that normally I can find a lot of similar things, and also the response of that problem or a thread is always very helpful. So I think that's a big plus on the experience with Flyte.
Great, fantastic. So let's go to Mücahit, then to Oleg, and then to Björn. So Mücahit, obviously, you seem to be at the center of everything here right now. Is that the secret to share, that you need somebody to drive this and to bring everyone together?
Yeah, so I help with the deployment of the flight, and I'm glad that Yini had give it a try, and we noticed lots of missing pieces, lots of things not working, etc. So we have fixed them on the way. For the flights with Kubernetes integration, I really like that we can manage the cluster resources, and that's quite specific because we might want to create some secrets in the namespaces that Flyte creates. Then we can actually easily configure this in the PAM templates, and we can actually bring all the customizations that we have in our own Kubernetes setup and actually use it with Flyte. So that's was actually a good plus for us.
Great, fantastic. So Oleg, hindsight, everything's 2020. What's your secret that you want to share?
Yeah, start thinking about how are you going to put this model into production from the very beginning. I think that would be the most important thing for me.
Absolutely.
Short and sweet.
No, I love this. I think this is really, people just start, it's the same thing when you have a project, everybody wants to run in code, but you got to have a strategy. And I assume, Björn, sitting on the data science side, we often feel, I mean, I have a data science background, we often feel like we're left out a little bit. And then all of a sudden you get thrown into the mix with, and you're like, oh, wow. So what was your experience, and what's your recommendation specific for data scientists to get started on an orchestration platform?
I mean, I think like if I think of myself a couple of years back, then we would like custom make some solutions, and I think that's you know, nowadays I think converging towards a common solution is makes a lot of sense to me. That would be my my guess.
Let me ask you one more question. Do data scientists have to understand and know Kubernetes?
There's this article by I don't know if I pronounced the name correctly, Björn, that wrote a great article about this, and I think it's not strictly necessary. I think data scientists have a lot of other things that they can focus on.
I agree, and Chip's latest book is actually really interesting with that regard too. Okay, fantastic. So I just want to say thank you, Schibsted team. This has been really very insightful. We would love to have you back, talk about your next experience. Obviously, you're doing a lot more with Flyte. That's fantastic. So I just want to say thank you, and we're going to put this video up onto social media as well. Please feel free to share it and comment on it. So I just want to say fantastic. I rarely have people with such different backgrounds, but they all work together on delivering one product. And I think this is really amazing. So kudos to you, and have a wonderful evening over there in Oslo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
I just
having
wanted
us.
to also say super thank you to everyone in working with Flyte. You're doing amazing job.
Thanks, Paul. Team appreciates it, and you know where to find them on the Slack channel. All right, take care. Bye-bye.